Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. So, being the final speaker, my job is to try and keep you guys energized. I promise I will not talk a lot about numbers and statistics that could be very boring. And so I tried to make the title of this a little edgy, and I decided to change it to Hacked the Google Robot. Here's what we learned, what I learned, and have a pretty face too on the start. It's interesting, the word hack is used in all kinds of contexts now, right? But I actually looked up on the Urban Dictionary, I think 2 days ago, or even yesterday, what is the slang meaning that people most associate with the word hack? Well, so the first one that is very popular is to jury-rig or improvise something intelligent but effectively. Well, that kind of sounds like what we do for work, right? Most good SEOs, pretty much that's what we do. So we're hackers by that definition. Or also seen as a clever or elegant technical accomplishment. Clever, elegant, technical, again. So I would say that, we are all a bunch of hackers, and if you want to be good at SEO, you should aspire to that. The last one here also uses jury rigs and temporary solution, because of course, everything's always changing with Google, right? Nothing's permanent what we do. A little bit more about myself. So, as Glenn said, I live in Saigon right now. I'm location-independent worker. Some people call that a digital nomad. I don't think I'm very nomadic, so I'm more location-independent. I founded Clickstream, which is an SEO and content strategy client services agency. Not very well phrased there. Fortunately, that's not the way I write it on my website or elsewhere. And that was about 2 years ago. Before that, about 12 years ago, I started Clickstream Marketing, which was in Cebu City. That's a long time ago. How many of you have been to the IT park as long ago as, let's say, 2005, I want to say? Yeah, 2005. How many of you have been in Cebu? 2005 or before. Do you remember the IT park at that time? There was nothing there, right? And now it's, I don't even know, what, a couple 100,000 people? So I almost took the first office space there, and I would have had the first office in the IT park. It was in the basement of a restaurant, and I didn't, so, history is I didn't follow in the past of the mega companies that are now working from there. So after that, I've also, the other work that I did was overseeing Brian Dean and Neil Patel's data studies. And that was more recently, over the past couple of years. Before that, I managed major accounts for SEMrush. Okay, onward. So here's the outline. And one thing I want to say is having listened to all these fantastic speakers that we have today, there's a couple things that stuck out for me. One was engagement, and how much everyone talked about engagement, which I think is really so important. And the other was probably how little we heard about machine learning. So these are two things that are really interesting to me, and I'm going to give a little bit of a different perspective on both of them. The 8 studies that I want to review with you. First one, so the 1 million Google search result was with Brian Dean, that one. And the second is about impactful article headlines. We have then website speed as a rank signal, return rate and search terms, branded keywords, then Google Hummingbird, then how long does it take to rank, and lastly, Google Keyword Planner versus Moz versus Href and versus SEMrush. Okay, so this was kind of probably one of the most interesting things I've done in my life, career-wise. This study I did after working at SEMrush. Brian reached out to me, and he likes to joke with me that it was the most expensive blog post ever. I'm not quite sure that's the case, but I ever saw it, and I had 2 other people working with me. It took 3 months. And then he published it as a blog post. If you know Brian Dean, you know he's famous for doing very, very long blog posts. So whereas other content pieces that are crazy in depth would probably be PDF, or for sure they'd be behind a paywall, this was just a blog post. So 3 months of work with countless hours, and he put it up as a blog post, and spent a lot of money to have me and my team do it. So I would say it's still actually a really good resource for beginners. And obviously it was a couple years ago, so things change quickly, but it's still a good resource. And I would also say that the information about Hummingbird in that is particularly relevant still. So we use data from a company called MarketMuse. And there's not so many software tools out there now that let you look at the content gaps that you have and look at the semantic relationships and understand what's good, what's bad. This tool is fabulous for that. And using it to do data research is, you can really get an incredible picture of the extent to which Google is using latent semantic indexing as opposed to the structured data, which you've heard more about today. This is actually one of my biggest interests, is the use of semantic analysis when I refer to the robot and hack the Google robot. The robot I think of course, is this artificial intelligence that you're using primarily to analyze the semantic associations that are within a page, within content. And I also just want to mention that as far as rank studies go, if you guys are interested in that, a lot of people are familiar with the Moz rank studies, and they're, in many ways, quite a lot of talking today about speed. And boy, it's just becoming more and more important, obviously, because of this mobile-centered world that we have, and the need to make website pages faster. So one of the things I can sort of, I can sort of concur with what's already been said is time to first byte. That is by far the most important speed metric that Google is using. So that means, here's your definition, although I think you've seen it before. I think first paint is basically the same thing, but it's not to read the whole thing, but the first little bit of website data to reach your browser, that's time to first byte. And they are looking at that a lot, and it's really used heavily. So, make sure I didn't miss that. No. Take a deep breath there for me, okay? So, this is what the correlation looks like. And you can see that the top two positions, and somebody mentioned that someone else had done a study on this, but the top two positions were really fast. Like there was a really big correlation between ranking the top two and time to first byte. So yeah, this is the biggest speed study ever done. It was, I think, about what? Did I have this in here? I think it's about 170,000 URLs we looked at. I may have taken it out, but basically no one had ever looked at so many. And also the other ones that have been done before were a little bit further in the past, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And so there may have been some changes that Google had since the earlier studies. So when you're thinking about time to first byte, the main thing is, or not just time to first byte, but about speed. The main thing is the waterfall that you've heard other people mention. You want to focus on the very beginning, which is the time to first byte, and to a large extent the end, when everything's fully rendered in the browser. So this is the actual correlations that we got. Again, huge correlation with first byte. Dot complete, that's when everything is complete with a document. And what's interesting here is, and I find this fascinating when you talk about what Google can see on a website page. Notice that something like where is it? Fully like visual complete, for example. Visual complete is like no correlation at all. And the reason for that is that they cannot render a lot of the things within the page without being too resource intensive. So they can understand you have JavaScript and they can render it in a lot of different ways, but they can't test the speed at which things like the interactive portion of the page is functioning. there's no way that they can do that. And then, so in terms of how you would improve your time to first buy, since you're doing these things not just for Google, but for your users, but if you're focused more on like the ranking, this is what's going to help the most for that. Use a CDN, optimize database queries. Of course, you need to talk to your developer. I'm sure some of you are not familiar with these terms. Reduce HTTP requests, and ensure you have a fast server response time. I need some water. Should I dive down? Thank you. Okay, thanks. Okay, so the next one. This one I did with Steve Racing of BuzzSumo. How many of you are familiar with BuzzSumo? Okay, so Steve, some of you may know, does a lot of data studies, and he is fantastic. Like, when you see something by BuzzSumo, it's a data study, he does the data work, but he also does all the write-ups. Like, he's a great writer as well. So if it's something that interests you, trust him and read it. It's going to be interesting and it's going to be trustworthy. So he helped me with the data, and then I put this together. There was a lot of different things that came out of it, but I just want to focus on one quick thing that came out of it, which is we looked at 3-word phrases and titles. So my developer, parsed like triplets, basically, of words, but excluding the stop words that would be like and or if or but, that kind of thing. And so the takeaway from this that I found is it's really amazing how the most popular phrases, or at least for 3 words, and I saw this with like 4 words, are extremely polarizing. So this was 2016, and you had, I don't know, the guys probably can't see this very well. Can you read this? Or? No, okay. So you have things like support Donald Trump. Wow, that's a pretty polarizing thing to have in an article title. You have, what else here? You have, okay, so there was a rock band that was popular in the early 1980s, Daryl Hall. Daryl Hall concert was there. That was a real outlier, like who would expect that? And then I think it was Black Lives Matter, again, very polarizing. What is this? I can't read here. But the point is also that social media is really not a very good way to measure success. It's a vanity metric, and a lot of you know that. But as I was doing this, what really surprised me was that the kinds of things you would expect to be so popular, if they weren't really like the kinds of things that have very high affinity and people have very strong feelings about, they didn't get as many social shares. So this was all based on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook shares. And then the other thing that came out and I was kind of alerted to by people at BuzzSumo is that there's so much fake sharing and bots and that sort of thing here with shares. It's not a good way to judge the popularity of something by looking at social shares. Support Donald Trump. Well, I wonder who amplified that. Could it have been like the Russians? I don't know. Just a guess. All right, so I want to very quickly detour and talk about the whole concept of data-driven content marketing and the way you should think about it. I don't know, how many of you have read a data-driven piece of information or marketing in the last, let's say, month? How many have not? So raise your hand if you're not. Oh, people are falling asleep here, I think. I'm seeing no hands for both questions. Okay, well, anyway, so there's a lot of inherent problems with some of this stuff that goes on with data-driven pieces. Of course, it's very popular. We all hear that. It's a great way to create content that will be shared, that will get links, all of that. But some of it that I've seen, is definitely problematic. And ask yourself these questions if you're trying to figure out, can I trust what I'm reading here? How is this done? So ask yourself, is it peer-reviewed somehow? Are they sharing raw data? Are they sharing the names of individuals contributing? Is there evidence of prior research or experience from that company or the individuals? So this is the results of a recent study by a company that's, they're not a research company, they're a company that provides data, and basically they said that these were the top ranking factors. And the first one was direct website visits. Well, Google cannot know about direct website visitors unless they were using their Chrome browser to sort of sniff out when people type in direct like that. But they've said over and over, time and time again, they don't do that. They say in conferences, and many of the best minds in SEO have said, wait a minute, there's no way they're doing this. They can't be doing this. They'd be like the biggest liars. And the same thing with time on site. Unless someone is what's called pogo sticking, searching, and then coming back, they don't know how much time someone spent on the site. And this comes back into some of the engagement stuff we were talking about before. They have other ways of knowing about engagement, and a lot of it's the code, which I find so interesting, because we talk a lot about engagement, but what they're really doing is evaluating the code about the design, the layout, and that can tell them, is this page well constructed? Is it going to cause, engagement where people stay on the site, and how many seconds are they staying on particular pages? They're not measuring that from within the browser. Unless, again, they're like the biggest liars, in which case they could just go out of business. Because they've said so many times they don't track people using Chrome. Oh, and then the other one that came up with, as like their big factor was pages per session. Again, how would they know that? I would love for someone to tell me how Google can figure these things out. And I'm really fascinated by the extent to which they tell tall tales. I'm not saying that they do exaggerate. Perhaps I think they probably lie, but they're not going to make up stuff that could get them into lawsuits and go out of business with things like, like using Chrome to spy on people. Okay, so next one is branded keywords. And a lot of these things you've heard something about today, so it's nice because I'm able to sort of, complement what people have already talked about. My question here was to look at non-branded versus branded keywords and to see what kind of differences we would find with them. And what I found was kind of surprising, and that is that the non-branded keywords in AdWords cost almost half, which is right here. CPC is 32 cents on average versus branded, which is 52 cents. But then if you look at organic, based on competitive density, which is an SEMrush factor, I used all the data for this was from SEMrush, you see that the non-branded is far more competitive, and the branded is far easier. So what does that mean? Does that mean that you should go after your direct competitors all the time and rank for their keywords as a way to, because it's easier, right? It's got all this value. So people do it in AdWords. They go after their direct competitors. Harvard, it's very funny, Harvard is constantly taking out AdWords about keywords with MIT in it, or Stanford, stuff like that. Everyone is competing in AdWords for their competitors' terms. And so what I found was that, well, first of all, so we looked at SEO agencies and content marketing agencies to see, are they doing this? Are they going after direct competitors? They should know, right? Like, they're SEO agencies. Obviously, they should know, is that a sensible thing to do? They're not. Basically, like, smart websites don't try and rank for their direct competitors. What I did find, though, was that a lot of the smart companies are ranking for their indirect competitors. And so the way you do that is you obviously, well, not obviously, but you can do things like writing a review article, and you all have heard about this, but now you can think about why it makes a lot of sense. When you rank for something, for example, like a, let's say Manila, the name of a Manila development and design agency the most popular in the whole city. You write a review about them, and if they're your perfect demographic, psycho-demographic, you just captured this whole audience, and it's going to be a much easier way of capturing it than a non-branded term. And then once they read this review that you've written about that agency, you have a very captive audience that may also need SEO or digital marketing. Because you determined beforehand it's a very similar audience. So obviously, like, you could also do things like giveaways or products, giveaways of their products or coupons or anything where you can talk about these companies, these brands that are not direct but that are indirect. All right, so next one here. So this was with Ahrefs, did this one. By the way, I have to tell you guys, I've done a lot of webinars and I've done a lot of writing. I haven't spoken that much. So if I'm short of breath, it's because this is a little new to me. Like, I'm more used to writing. Apologies for that. Okay, so this is a new metric that Ahrefs has called return rate. It's really fascinating if you want to look at this in terms of, like, they have all these new metrics in Ahrefs. That, you know, Moz is the only other company that's using Clickstream data, which is kind of like what people think Google might be doing, which is to say sniffing out people's behavior on a web page. So they aggregate the data on Google search, and they can tell all kinds of things about the way specific users interact with Google search, but it's aggregated and it's private, because they don't have any way of, these plugin companies can't tell any information about who the actual individual is, or if they did, it would be illegal, you know, because basically you can't do that. So they aggregate this, and they can tell all kinds of things about what's happening on Google search. And so return rate is, if you type in a search term, within 1 month, how often do people come back and use that same term again? So one example would be, let's see, was 135. It was, whoops, something, let's see, where is this? I wanted to find, well, okay, anyway, so one example would be like Christmas trees. You know, how many times in December does a person come back and search for the same thing again? We know that things like, you know, weather outside, something like that, someone's going to type a lot within 1 month. But what was really interesting was that the top 135 highest return rate, where people keep coming back and typing the same thing in within a 1 month period, they were all brand searches. And these were the top 135 that had significant volume. It's not as relevant if I was looking at like long tail keywords or something. So we found that what's happening, of course, is there's so many people that are just either being lazy or misspelling what they're looking for, but they're unambiguous searches. So there's tons of misspells for brands. Tons of people, instead of typing .net, they just, you know, they type in their browser bar. So their intent is not even to search. Their intent is actually just to go to a website or be lazy and go through Google. And one of the takeaways from that, which is, I'm afraid, not quite as actionable as some of the other things I'm showing here, is that basically Google is earning a massive amount of money in AdWords simply by helping brands defend themselves. Because there's all this traffic that's being typed in and having to go through search in order for people to, you know, to actually then click within Google search. If nothing else, I hope it helps you to understand, you know, how they're making their money and the kind of things that you know, contribute to their bottom line. And part of that too is their artificial intelligence, because so much of what I've done is about the semantic LSI, is just astounding how accurate it is. So they know with incredible degrees of confidence, if someone misspells something, depending on the level of ambiguity, they do a great job showing the right result or showing a mix depending on the other kinds of misspells that have happened before. But on top of that are all these AdWords that are being paid for those brands. And they're basically taking a toll to use that incredible machine learning and AI. So next one here, how are we doing for time? 20 minutes. How many? 5. Okay, let's skip a little bit here since we're short on time. So this study was one that used data from Ahrefs and SEMrush, and it was basically how long does it take to rank. And this is going nutty on me. What did I do? I don't know what it is. Guys, is somebody clicking that? Yeah, no. Okay. Okay. Okay, so this is a magic. What's going on here? This study was about Google Hummingbird, and we were trying to understand, again, about semantic and how to use machine learning to score and rank associated topics and related topics. So, there used to be synonyms, and now Google is looking at the degree of relatedness between topics on a page and on a website. And I used market views again for this, which, if you really want to do like topic analysis or finding ways to sort of figure out what's most related as a topic, that's a pretty incredible tool. So this is an example of what can be done with this data. So market views shows they sort of have their own knowledge graph in a sense, figuring out what are the most closely related topics. And then they crawl through a website and you can see what's there and what's not. So to give you an example of a site that did really poorly when we were scoring these, this site here, notice those zeros? So Fight the Score, they don't mention that once on their entire site. Massive website, all about personal finance, one of the biggest. And yet, they mention credit cards 12,000 times. And American Express, blah, blah, blah. So the point with this is that if you're going to be comprehensive, if you're going to be thorough in covering whatever the theme of your website is, you can no longer just use the same words over and over that address the main themes of your website. You've got to be talking about these other things. And if you're not, then what you've created is not thorough, and it's going to basically fail with the whole semantic similarities that Google looks at so much now. And so one way you want to do that is that if you have a lot of different but similar topics on your website, what we found was that the best sites that are really doing well with the Hummingbird comprehensiveness, they figure out ways to bridge the gap between these disparate topics. So if you have a site that has similar but different topics, think about what's something in between so that it's coming all together. Yeah, so this one was using data from Ahrefs and from SEMrush, and this is it's an infamously difficult study because it's so hard to define what's what, but basically we were trying to figure out how long does it take to rank. So we looked at month by month over the course of a whole year when an article was first found to when it's ranked the highest, and then the following months it went down or a little down or stayed the same. And I was talking to Russ Jones, who's over at Moz, and Cyrus and I were just talking about that. Russ, you ever see his name? Russ is like one of the most brilliant programmers, developers in SEO, and he was the one that told me, Eric, don't even try this. There's just, how are you going to know how long it takes to rank? There's a million questions about what that actually means. But the thing that I found really interesting when I did all this was that I found that there was a surprisingly similar amount of time across different size of domains and link authority. So if this result that I had, which was 3.3 months is the average time to reach that highest point of ranking. If that was just sort of, there's too many moving parts. Like it's this besides this is that, or how do we define it? What was the method we used to find it? You would think that that's going to bias certain sites. Like, why would Amazon, take us like 3 months to get to its highest rank on really certain words, and then a smaller site, wouldn't they take a different amount of time? Well, that's sort of the one thing I can say that I feel some level of confidence here is that, 3.3 months was the result I got from different size sites. And the thing I would add to that too is that, think about if you want to build links, those 3 months, those are a really key time. Because if during those 3 months, you're going to get like exponential results from those links. Because things are kind of bouncing around. Google's trying to put it as high as it can. That's a really good time to get the most links. Running out of time here. So, let's see. Whoops. Here we go again. Okay. Really running out of time. So, before the conference, I did something for you guys just for this. So, got to be sure to cover this. So, I reached out to 3 of the companies that I've been doing data research studies with, and asked them to share some teasers about information that's not really public yet. I didn't verify how public this is or is not, but here's some teasers about what's coming out with some of the what I think are some of the most important tools in SEO. So for Moz, I mentioned Russ Jones, who's the principal search scientist. What he said was that Rand hinted about a major change and improvement to their link graph on Reddit. Significant update, blah, 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 blah. So he said, I think we'll see big things in the next few months. Well, I would add to that in talking to some other people, I think you're going to see some really big changes with Moz in a big way. It's been a long time since they've made significant improvements to their tool set. All this Clickstream data they've added, amazing. That's amazing, but keep your heads up for that. And then for Market Muse, granted, most of you are not familiar with this company, but if you want to take a look at them, they are moving towards being able to analyze an entire site, identify blind spots with this topic coverage for this semantic analysis that Google uses, and think quality content issues, and then prioritize based on SEO impact so that you construct your content plan right within the platform. So basically create a whole content plan by analyzing the pages. And in some ways, what this does is it gets rid of the need for an expert to do all of this outlining of content creation. And then Tim Sulo, head of marketing and product strategy at Ahrefs. Last week, I asked him, and he said, and this one, I don't know if it's anything too new, but it's interesting. He said for the past 1.5 years, they've been working on a huge update of their web crawler. He said the difference between this new crawler that they're working on, so they're doing a new crawler, which they're going to release in the next 6 months, would be somewhere along the lines of the difference between Moz's current crawler for links, this is for links, and Ahrefs' current crawler. So taking a little poke at Moz, but that's okay because Tim and Ahrefs are awesome. They play nicely. They don't try and poke Moz in the eye, just like Moz doesn't poke them in the eye. It's all fair game. So yeah, you can look to Ahrefs to continue being able to crawl things on a really fast scale. Time? Finito? Finito. All right, finito.
Thank you so much, Eric.